Now we're going to do a think, pair, share on how schools can develop a culture of visible thinking. First off, I'm going to give you a moment to think on your own before discussing with others. Now I'm going to ask you to turn to the person next to you or in groups of threes to discuss of what you thought of. And then lastly, I'm going to ask for you to share with the rest of your class some of the ideas that you came up with. The article discusses two ways of developing a school-wide culture of visible thinking. One was developing an artful thinking program. This involves visible documentation of students' thinking, which is displayed around the classroom. Schools can hold parent nights to allow parents to observe the thinking process. The second way is through staff development, which has enabled teachers to go beyond teaching content material but instead focusing on the thinking behind the content. Through teacher adapting visible thinking, they can see the connections students are making, which is rewarding for not only the teacher but also to the student.
Visible thinking in particular learning areas. So my minor is HASS, so I've done how we can use visible thinking in the HASS classroom. So one strategy I found was chalk talks. So I've put two examples in on the screen. So the first one is more of an individual chalk talk or a small group chalk talk. And then the second picture is a whole class whiteboard chalk talk. So an important thing to note is that doing it as a whole class will slow the process down. Because you need students to be quiet, that's the main rule, and they can only communicate through whatever they're writing with. So that's their form of communication. So if you're doing it as a whole class, it does become more time consuming. So two topics I thought that we could use this strategy within the HASS classroom were what were some of the characteristics of the medieval world, which relates to the content descriptor that I've written up there, and how have landforms and processes shaped the Earth's surface, which again directly relates to that content descriptor. So if I were to do a chalk talk in the HASS classroom, one of these questions would go in the middle of a blank piece of paper, and then students would be in small groups. To begin with, they would write down their initial ideas, and then as each student writes down their initial ideas, other students draw arrows and circles to visually represent the connections that they've made or the questions that other people's ideas have stimulated, which makes an awesome starting point for class discussion as well. Okay, so now just a quick activity. I'm going to get you guys to create a chalk talk for your own learning area. So I just need you to jump into groups of 3 or 4, and we'll provide you all with an A3 sheet of white paper, so one per group. And then amongst yourselves, you just need to decide on a learning area to complete this task. So maybe choose the most common amongst you and your group members. Then within this learning area, construct one question or topic which may be used for a chalk talk. So one thing I did find was that chalk talks are great to assess prior knowledge. So for instance, at the start of the medieval unit, you might do a chalk talk just to see where they're at and what questions they have, and then perhaps interweave these throughout what you're going to be teaching them in the unit. So I'll give you 30 seconds, and every member of each group should write down their initial ideas on their topic. It'd be great if you could all try and use a different coloured pen, but if not, that's okay. And then after this 30 seconds is up, I'll give you another 30 seconds, and every member should begin to connect their ideas and questions to other student ideas and questions. So just simply drawing a line and just branching off that idea. Then after completing this process, I want you to be prepared to discuss the pros and cons of this strategy in the learning area that you guys chose. And just what you found interesting about it. So I found 4 positives of chalk talking in the HASS classroom personally. So one is that it's collaborative, so it allows students to work together in small groups or partners, and then eventually contribute to the class. So this relates to our 21st century learners, which visible thinking strategies can help us do so. The second one was that it creates authentic knowledge. So there is a large focus on the process that goes into the chalk talk rather than the product, which is most of the time a bit messy and you can't really comprehend it as well as you can if you were involved in the process. And because of this, it contributes to a positive classroom culture. So a positive classroom culture is one that values the learning process. It's not all about grades, it's not all about the final product, it's about what goes into it and how you have arrived where you are. And then the fourth one is that students can demonstrate a range of low to high order abilities. So initially when you first started the chalk talk, you just had to write down your first ideas. So this is the low order abilities of like remembering and listing and just getting an initial start on the topic. And then you work your way up to high order abilities, which the teacher can facilitate just by verbally questioning the class as they're doing this silently. So this is when students start to make connections and form questions from other people's ideas. So on the other hand, the negatives of chalk talking in HASS that I found were who wrote what. So unless you kind of watch every student all the time, you're not going to know exactly who wrote what on the chalk talk. I mean, you could ask the students to kind of counteract this, but yeah, initially you're not going to know what student wrote what and who's struggling where. You're just going to have a rough idea, depending on what small group that student may be in. And then the second one is a lack of structure. So as I said before, it is a bit messy, the final product of a chalk talk. So some students may become overwhelmed by this and therefore disengaged. And then 3, lack of confidence. So if students aren't confident enough to write their ideas down and share it amongst their group, then they may not want to contribute in a chalk talk, and we need to find alternatives to kind of encourage them to do so.
So now let's journey into the field of English and see how visible thinking could be applied within an English classroom. So today's thinking routine is referred to as the post-it note essay writing activity. So it's understood that at times students can feel anxious about being faced with an essay task. So perhaps they might struggle with understanding how to get their ideas out of their brain and onto a piece of paper, or they might be nervous about how they are required to group their ideas into specific paragraphs in order to receive the marks that they wish to achieve. So hopefully this essay writing tool can assist students in feeling more confident in their ability to achieve all that they can when they are faced with an essay assessment. So it's a short 5-step sequence. Step 1, students are presented with the essay question. Step 2, students are then given 10 post-it notes on which they are to write their ideas upon. Step 3, so in their group, students would then be given 5 minutes to write down as many ideas as they can in response to the essay question that they've been given. So for example, each piece of evidence would go on its own sticky note. Step 4, students would then be given 2 minutes to group the post-it notes into 3 groups. So similar ideas would therefore go together in order to form 3 groups, and these 3 groups are what would then be the 3 body paragraphs of their essay response. Step 5, students would then start writing their essay response. So here are just some quick examples of how the post-it note essay writing activity could be used within a Year 8 and a Year 10 classroom. So for example, within a Year 8 classroom, it could be used to assist students during a film study. For example, if they were studying the Hunger Games, they could use it to respond to the question, discuss the important themes and or messages presented in the feature film you have studied. You must make reference to generic film conventions in your response with appropriate inclusion and analysis of associated evidence. And then there's a curriculum link for that, for the for that question. And then at a year 10 level, so for example, if they were doing a novel study of, let's say, To Kill a Mockingbird, they could use the thinking routine to respond to the question, discuss how the author has manipulated language features for a particular effect. Make reference to the text studied in class with explicit reference to appropriate evidence with detailed analysis. And then once again, that's the curriculum link for that question. So now it's time for you to give the routine a go. So we want you to respond to the following question. So construct a persuasive essay response to the statement, schools should remain open regardless of the current health crisis. So what we want you to do is you are going to be given 5 minutes to write down your ideas on the 10 post-it notes that are in front of you. So you're going to work in your groups that you're sitting in currently. So we'll give you 5 minutes to write down all of your ideas in response to the question, and then we'll give you 2 minutes to group similar ideas together in order to form 3 body paragraphs. So your 5 minutes will start now, and then we'll tell you once 5 minutes is up, and then we would tell you that you have 2 minutes to group them together. And then hypothetically you would start writing your essay, but we're not going to get that far today. And then at the end of this activity, we would then ask you the question, do you think this routine could be useful in the classroom? Or how could such a thinking routine such as this post-it note activity be incorporated into your own learning area? And then we would then ask for responses to the question. So just a quick review of the post-it note essay writing task. So some positives is that it promotes collaborative learning, which therefore allows for ideas to be shared amongst students. The steps are easy to follow, and it also provides a flexible guideline that can be used across a variety of learning areas, so like from English to maths to science, etc. It also occurs within a quick time frame, and at its core, it provides opportunity for students to get an idea of how others go about their thinking process. Some negatives that could be considered is that perhaps it could cause arguments as a result of differing opinions between students. Students could also perhaps feel rushed due to being under a strict time limit. And also the concept of a group setting. Students might feel overwhelmed in a group setting, or perhaps might be reluctant in sharing their ideas due to not believing that they would be taken well by the rest of the group.
Visible thinking can be an extremely useful tool in a science classroom to break down content and to engage students to critically and creatively think about the large amounts of content that they're exposed to in a science lesson. An example of a strategy that can be implemented into a Year 7 science class focusing on food trends and food webs is a jigsaw activity. A jigsaw activity involves small group work and research to create a detailed mind map covering a variety of topics or concepts. We're going to do a quick version of a jigsaw activity in class now. If you look at the top of your desk, each person has been provided a small, different animal card. The animal card is your group you have been allocated to. Could you please now stand up and assemble yourself into groups according to your animal on your card? Once you have moved into your groups, you need to number yourself from 1 to 3, with each number representing a different focus topic. For example, number 1s will be focusing on mining. The group will then split off into their numbered groups to research the same topic and complete their focus questions for 5 minutes to become an expert of the topic. Once the 5 minutes is completed, you'll move back to your original animal group, and you have 5 minutes as a group to go through the 3 topics, and for each expert of the topic, you will explain and teach the other members what you have learnt. You will be making note of each student's response on the mind map, and will have a completed mind map in the end covering the 3 topics in detail.